What if I feel that the restrictive covenants that my employer is asking me to sign are unreasonable? Part 2. I'm Richard Hiron, also known as the Hironator, and I'm an employment law solicitor. Now, the answer to this week's question was hinted at in last week's video, and the answer to that question is the courts. Now, it is ultimately for the courts to decide whether a restrictive covenant or part of a restrictive covenant is unreasonable or not. So before you've gone to court with your employer, if you have breached the restrictive covenants, you will have this kind of two-way process where the two of you are saying from the employer's side, they're enforceable, you've breached them, you owe us X, Y, Z. And on your side, you're probably saying, no, I haven't, I don't owe you anything. So that's the kind of pre-action discussion that will have been going on probably before you end up in court proceedings. But then when you get to the court proceedings, the court will sit down, it will look at the basis of the restrictive covenants, which will either be a contract of employment or an employment-related settlement agreement, or it could even be a third document. So, for example, if you are a shareholder and an employee, it could be restrictive covenants in a shareholders agreement, for example. So the court will sit there, the judges will sit there, they will examine the evidence, which includes that document, whatever it is, the impact on you as the employee, because the courts typically do not like actions taken in restraint of trade. So preventing an employee from going and working for another employer or in the same industry or in another industry. And they will also take a look at what damage has been caused to your employer by an alleged breach of the restrictive covenants. So what losses, typically financial losses, but also other losses as well, has your former employer suffered by you apparently breaching the restrictive covenants? So they don't just angle down on saying, oh, you've breached these, this means you're a terrible person, that means that you've got to pay all this compensation. They look at the situation in the round, not from any one party's perspective. So naturally, you probably wouldn't want to end up in a court, but that's an explanation of what is likely to happen if you do end up in a court over an alleged breach of restrictive covenants in an employment situation. We've got one more piece to talk about next week on restrictive covenants. In the meantime, I hope that's answered the question though. However, if you have a settlement agreement that you're finding hard, bring it to Richard.